okay?
Yes, I can hear you.
Good.
I don't know if your video's not on.
Oh, it's not. Huh. Okay.
If you,
There we go.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, great. I can see. I love your background.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
interesting. When I first connected, I didn't realize it was, I thought it was static, but it's actually a webcam because it changes. When the fog rolls in through the Golden Gate, the bridge is obscured. You can
Oh,
just see
that's,
the towers and stuff like that.
so your background will change over time.
Right.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just one of the standard backgrounds that comes with it. I've just got the basic Zoom package. I don't have any of the other packages. So
Yeah, I've seen a lot of my friends have random backgrounds.
yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So before we start, there are just some things I need to go over with you.
Okay.
So first, you can talk as long as you want. I have all the time in the world, and the more you say, the better. Um, and don't afraid to be honest. We want to hear you without any filter because that's the best way for us to learn from you.
Okay. Sure.
And also, if at any time you say something you didn't mean to, just tell me, and we can cut it out of the video.
Okay.
If you're uncomfortable with any of the questions, just let me know and we can skip it. And in the final recordings, we might edit out some of the questions.
Oh, just lost you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sometimes that happens with my headphones. Mom, is there any way you can just try and be quiet? Okay, cool. Yeah, so, okay, where were we?
You were just giving me some of the ground rules and all.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so in like the final product to make like these interviews more concise for our publications, we may cut out certain questions and answers. Yeah, so my name is Armaan, and of course, I want to thank you for agreeing to have this conversation. And before we start, I just need you to say to the camera that you consent to being recorded.
Yes. Yeah, that's fine, Armaan. I'm Gary Fallick, and
All right, that's
enjoyed working with you folks so far, and it's a treat to get to know you a little bit in person here.
Yeah, it's nice to get to see you too. I know we've talked on the phone a few times.
Yeah.
So let me begin with a brief summary of our project. It's called, oh, actually, I'm pretty sure you already know this, but it's called Project Wisdom, and it's an initiative to interview as many seniors as possible so that we can sort of draw from your experiences in order to create better decisions in the future. Because after all, those who can't remember the past are condemned to repeat it. So my first question is kind of tell us about yourself. Where did you grow up? How'd you get to where you are today? Essentially, what's your life story?
Okay. Well, life story. 25 words or less. Yeah. Can I, before I begin, I'm curious about something I'd like to ask you about.
Yeah.
This past Saturday, this past weekend, MIT had its reunion weekend, and of course, it was all done via remote communication connection. And one of the speakers that I heard was Dr. Joe Coughlin from the MIT Age Lab.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether you folks at all are acquainted with him, but one of the things he mentioned right in his talk was that they have an actual program going on nationwide, reaching out to high schools to encourage students to interact with the senior generation to see where things might function better in the future. And I was just curious whether or not your organization, IOC, was an outgrowth of an activity like that, or somebody in your group had some connection with the MIT Age Lab or something and was inspired to do this, or whether it's just a pure coincidence.
Actually, I didn't even know about that. Sorry, can you spell out his name so I can contact him?
Sure. Hold on one second. I can just pull this screen down a bit here.
Yeah.
Sorry,
I'm just gonna rearrange my screen slightly.
His name, Dr. Joseph Coughlin, Coughlin.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So actually, this video project is an idea we had like a really long time ago, like beginning of the year.
Mm-hmm.
And it just like during the pandemic, because we're not able to like physically go and help seniors, we figured that this was kind of the next best thing.
Mm-hmm.
So no, actually, I didn't know about this though. I'll reach out to him.
Hmm.
and see if maybe we can do some kind of collaboration. So yeah. Uh,
Great. Well, it's certainly in the spirit of what he was talking about, because he was talking about a whole host of things. But we won't get into that now. That's not why we're
yeah,
here. But I was just curious if that was the impetus for it at all.
no, it wasn't actually. That's actually pretty interesting. I had no idea.
Okay, good. All right, life story. I was born, grew up, uh, went through school, elementary, high school, and in Saratoga Springs, New York, which is a medium-sized town in upstate New York, north of Albany. Um, Coincidentally, along with Lexington, it happens to have a lot of history
Yeah.
associated with it with respect to the Revolutionary War. Supposedly, one of the areas, one of the battles was considered the turning point of the Revolution. It was the Battle of Saratoga. So it sort of sparked interest in history in me, and it's by pure coincidence we end up living in Lexington, but it's a nice connection anyway. It's all part of the same narrative of the Revolutionary War. Um, High school, I had my inclination was in science, math, and so I just assumed I would be going into an engineering program. And again, now this is graduating from high school in 1954, so in those days, science and math was really sort of a male-dominated field. There was no one in my family who was involved with that at all, but it was just something that I followed my interests and ended up applying and coming to MIT for my undergraduate work and majored in chemical engineering. From there, I stayed on, uh, got a master's in chem engineering, had a thesis advisor for both of my degrees who was very eager to have me stay on and complete a doctorate in a new program that MIT was just starting, a graduate program in materials science, which was sort of interdisciplinary
Can I
chemistry.
actually ask you a question about that?
Sure.
I was kind of researching you, and I see that you've published like a few papers on liquid chromatography. What
Yeah.
made you get interested in that?
Okay. Well, that's sort of the where we're going. Um, I After I graduated, I was very interested in not the classical chemical engineering of distillation and refineries and things like that, but it so happened that it was sort of more applied chemistry in chemistry of various materials, especially synthetic materials like polymers and plastics. So I got involved in that and went to work for a company. And in those days, it was interesting. MIT didn't have uh, the strong entrepreneurial uh, environment that exists today. I think everybody going to MIT today assumes they're going to start their own company
Yeah.
1 year out or something. Um, and certainly a number of my classmates did start their own companies over the years, but it was much more of a convention, I think, to assume that you were going to graduate and go to work for a larger company and work in the industrial or the academic environment, or perhaps for the government or commercial laboratories, whatever. Anyway, so I got involved in that and had a couple of different jobs, always in Eastern Massachusetts. Didn't move far from the tree. First job I had was in a place called Leominster, which was only about, I don't know, 40 miles west of here. And it was a plastics community. It was a company that had really acquired a lot of plastics businesses, both molding and also even producing some plastic materials. So I worked for the largest uh, company in the community, Foster Grant, which also made sunglasses and other things. But then after about 3 years, I got a call from my thesis advisor that he was starting his own consulting company, and he asked me to come and join him, which I did. And it was a company that worked on consulting contracts for industry in development of novel materials. And I did develop a couple of things. And in the course of developing one of them, we had a client in Pittsburgh, and it had to do with being able to make a composite material with plastics and putting minerals in them, mineral fillers in them to strengthen them. And one of the questions was, what was the impact on the molecular structure of the polymer? And this company had a new device that was an instrument for measuring the molecular weight distribution of polymers. And this was a tricky thing up to that point. There weren't any really good tools for doing this, and this was a pretty interesting instrument. And I thought it was interesting. I tucked it away. And a few years later, I was in the midst of career changes after the consulting company got to a certain point where it was being acquired and phased out and all. And I ended up making contact with a company called Waters, which had made this device I had seen to measure molecular weight distribution. It was something called a gel permeation chromatograph. And I joined the company. By this time, I had made the transition from pure technical to a technical business development marketing environment. This came about during our contract work with clients when I was still with the company my thesis advisor had founded. And then, so I joined Waters, which was the company that made these gel permeation chromatographs, but also they were embarking on other forms of chromatography. And liquid chromatography was a more generic form. It applied across the board to lower molecular weight species, not just polymers. So I joined the company as head of marketing, and this was an interesting career move. And it really, in some ways, is sort of, I think, one of the sort of philosophies I always had. I've never been adverse to change. And I've always felt that, you know, when change is occurring, whether you're the agent for causing the change or if you're experiencing change around you, I've always found it interesting to embrace change, to find out how things are going, to look in different directions and see where things might go. So it's really leaving a lot of pathways open rather than resisting change. And this company Waters was just really starting to pioneer the use of liquid chromatography in all of its various forms. Gel permeation chromatography was one special area, but liquid chromatography had a lot more range. And this was in the early 70s and coincided with the explosion of the pharmaceutical industry in a lot of the new areas, and they were looking for tools. Gas chromatography had been established long before liquid chromatography. The difference being is the form of the sample you're analyzing. In gas chromatography, everything had to be volatile. But in liquid chromatography, all you had to do was have your sample in solution. And that opened up a lot more opportunities and in some ways reduced some of the complexity. So it was a convergence of a lot of things that really helped its adoption. It was a little easier to use. The industries that were going to be big users, namely the pharmaceutical industry in particular, was going through a rapid area of research and development, and liquid chromatography played a role, right from everything from basic research all the way up through quality control. And when a new drug was established, one of the things that was required was that the drug had to be the protocols for analyzing purity and stability, shelf stability, and so forth had to be part of the application to the Food and Drug Administration. And liquid chromatography began to play a very dominant role. So this was a in my case, I think it was very fortuitous. When I joined the company in 1971, our total worldwide sales for the whole year were about $3 million. And over the years, we grew, we went public, we were acquired, we spun off, we went public again, we acquired other companies. And by the time I retired, 30 years later, we were almost $1 billion corporation. So we went from about,
That's a lot, yeah.
so we went from about a $3 million corporation up to about a $3 million annual sales revenue, up to about almost $1 billion. And now it's a multi-billion dollar corporation. But anyway, during that time, even though I was there over 30 years, it wasn't the same 1 year 30 times. Every year was different. Every year was a new experience. And there were always new pathways opening up and opportunities opening up. So again, if you were adverse to change, this was not the place for you. But I enjoyed it and I thrived on it. So that was my sort of my career in a nutshell. I enjoyed always the business and market development and marketing side of things, but it was always with respect to technical applications. So I never had to abandon my technical training. You know, without it, I couldn't have done the job I did, because I had to be able to communicate with people in all areas of technology. We dealt with some Nobel Prize winners. We dealt with quality control people in pharmaceutical companies and environmental testing labs, government agencies, and it was a broad spectrum, and it was really, really kind of fun. During that time, I also got involved in development of a new line of business in laboratory robotics, because to get these samples into solution, many times, depending if you're dealing with a tablet or a pill or something, you needed to be able to have a standard procedure to get them into suitable solution to analyze them. And sample preparation was something that was sort of in some cases, the most labor-intensive part of things. And so in the mid-'80s, automation of some of these sample preparation procedures and development of a laboratory robot or robotics to do some of this was part of it. So there was always technology involved in this, and it was interesting. It was always interesting, always fascinating, and it also got us to, in a sense, to deal worldwide with all, people all over the world. We were a worldwide company, and it brought me to a lot of different interesting places around the world.
Yeah.
So that was the career, and as I say, I retired in about 2002 after about 30 plus years with Waters. During this time, of course, when I first got out of MIT after my grad school, I was married to a wonderful lady that I'm still very much in love with, that I met while we were in school. She was at Boston University, met, and over the years we've had 2 terrific kids, sort of like Wobegon, above average children. And each of them are now married with their own families. Each of them have 2 kids. So we have a nice family. They're spread around. Our son and his family are in southern New Jersey, and our daughter and her family are in the San Francisco Bay Area in Oakland. So anyway, and the grandkids are now in, 3 of the 4 of them are in college, and the 4th one's entering college this fall. So things move along. Yeah. So anyway, that was career, and that was some of the experiences. So when I graduated after MIT and after my industrial career, I felt I wanted a change of pace. And one of the things I started doing was a lot more volunteer activities. And one of the first ones that I did with any real intensity was to join an organization called English at Large, which provided free tutoring in English as a second language. And we were dealing predominantly with an immigrant community. And I began there as a tutor and continued for many, many years tutoring English, tutoring. And I had one student that I sort of stayed with. We became, instead of just student teacher, we became really good friends. And he's a Chinese man. He's about 5 years older than I am. And it was great. We did everything from just talking about family to teaching him how to get his citizenship. Got him through his citizenship and everything. So it was a great experience. During that time, I was invited to join the board of directors of this organization, and also ultimately became president of the board of English at Large, and operated there for a while. During this time, I also, my wife and I were invited to join a new organization that was forming in Lexington. It was called Lexington at Home. And it was an organization of seniors who really felt they wanted to stay in our own homes as we age, aging in place. That's the term that I guess the government coined for it. There was a time when I used to shy away from that term because it reminded me of a wine cellar or cheeses, sitting on shelves somewhere, aging in place. But we're a little more active than that. So I did join Lexington at Home, and we've been members almost since the start. We did not found it. My wife and I didn't found it, but we've joined it, and we've grown with it. And it's an organization now in Lexington that's got about 160 members. We have about 5 chapters, and again, our goal is to help each other age in place. We have, it's mostly a social support organization, but in addition to that, we also do give each other a helping hand. We call it help in a pinch. If someone needs a hand, and we don't try to replace social agencies or services that are available. And the other thing that we try to do is to keep each other informed about all the different resources and programs that are out there. And certainly your organization is one that we've highlighted and made sure people know about. I know some of our members, ourselves included, have definitely taken advantage and really appreciated the kind of work you folks do. So our hats are off to you. We really appreciate, feel lucky that we have an organization like yours here in Lexington.
And we certainly appreciate all your help and, helping us expand and, telling seniors about us.
Yeah, well, we've been trying to get the word out and keep reminding people of that. So anyway, I've been involved in with Lexington at Home, and as part of in the earlier days, I was invited to speak on a panel at an organization called Minuteman Senior Services, which is a sort of quasi-government agency that administers a whole host of government agencies. It's administered through the Executive Office of Elder Affairs, Massachusetts, and it administers programs, everything from elder care to Meals on Wheels and senior advocacy and so forth. And again, I spoke at a conference on alternative housing arrangements, living arrangements, because our Lexington at Home was kind of an innovative organization, a sort of a virtual village in place, so
Yeah.
where people lend each other a hand. And again, I was invited to join the board of directors of Minuteman Senior Services, and I served on the board there for about 12 years until I said, well, it's time enough to have someone else take over and all. But again, it's a really good organization. It's part of a statewide network, and it serves 16 cities and towns in our area, Lexington and contiguous area, and provides a whole host of different services, social support services. And again, this is the kind of thing, as I said, it's complementary to what Lexington at Home is doing, or vice versa. And Lexington at Home really is the organization that is our starting point. But for more substantive programs, this is an agency that we've again tried to make sure that our members are well aware of. So in fact, I was on the board and I was on the executive committee of Minuteman Senior Services for a number of years. But like many organizations, and same thing with English at Large, you get to a point where you say, okay, I've been on this for, long enough, served in various capacities, and now it's time to let someone else have some of the fun. So right now, a lot of my focus is on Lexington at Home, and we operate as a separate entity. We are really a club, a social support network. And in order to keep the socialization aspect functional, we have broken into chapters. We've adopted a chapter model so that we have smaller units of groups of people. And then the whole organization is governed by a board of directors comprised of representatives from each of the 5 chapters that we have now. And right now I am the co-chair of the board. I have been for a few years now, of Lexington at Home. And we'll see. I'll probably continue in that role for another couple of years. But I have an excellent co-chair right now. She's terrific. And, I'm hoping someday she'll be able to pick it up and run with it. But in the meantime, it's where a lot of things are going. A lot of things are happening right now. And I mentioned this MIT reunion when we first started talking. And I've been involved in MIT alumni affairs for many, many years. And I've been involved mostly in helping to plan reunions. And I'm also the class secretary. So I write the notes up for the alumni magazine well, it now comes out every other month. So, and it keeps me in touch with all of my classmates, which is kind of fun. And I've gotten to know a lot of people that I didn't know as undergraduates, and maintained relationships with a lot of them. So I think that's sort of a overall picture. I've rambled on here a little bit. So
there is one thing I want to know about is, for some reason, when I was researching you, the fact that you love fly fishing came up a ton. What exactly is that?
Oh, what is fly fishing? Fly fishing is you did a good job of researching. Yeah. Fly fishing is a form of fishing in which you use various little creations of feathers and hooks and whatever, yarn or whatever, to sort of emulate what an actual fly or other insect would be that the fish feed on. So fly fishing involves both using flies that are submerged underwater, because fish mostly feed underwater. And then, but also, depending on the circumstances, fish will come up to the surface and feed on those flies as well. And it's a certain form of fishing. It doesn't use generally the kind of lures and some of the other equipment that conventional fishing uses. It's a branch of fishing. And it has some technique to it in terms of being able to cast the fly out, because you're using lightweight equipment, you're using very lightweight lines, and you're really trying to imitate the insects that the fish are likely to feed on, and as such, then hopefully you can catch a few from now and then. But it's a great sport, and one of the nice things about it, a lot of fly fishing that I do is for trout. And trout like to live in cold, flowing waters. So that takes you to some very, very, very pretty areas in terms of where you might fish. And people are surprised to know that there are some of these areas right here in Massachusetts some in eastern Massachusetts, some within an hour's ride of Lexington, some in western Massachusetts. They're just lovely, lovely areas. And fly fishing has taken me to a variety of places around the world. I didn't mention that my wife and I have always enjoyed traveling. I traveled a lot on business, but we also used to travel a lot for pleasure. And fly fishing has also taken me as far away as Chile to actually do some fly fishing in Patagonia, because there are certain areas in the world that are just the meccas of fly fishing.
Yeah.
Patagonia is one of them, between the scenery and the wild fish that are there, varieties of trout and so forth. It's really an exciting place to go. But you could also go fly fishing right over at the Res in Lexington if you want to go for half an hour or something of that sort. You won't catch any trout, except when sometimes they stock it early in the spring. The state has a program, State Department of Fisheries and Wildlife, that stocks a lot of bodies of water, and some of them are not flowing, some of them are ponds and lakes, and trout can live in those environments as well. But it's a great sport, and it's one that you're constantly improving, and you never become the expert you'd like to be at all.
Yeah.
It's a very enjoyable sport. You can do it alone, you can do it with a group of people, and it's really a lot of fun to do. So what else have you learned about me that I haven't told you about?
So, well, my notes say fly fishing, Lexington at home, English at large, Minuteman Senior Services, MIT class secretary, and liquid chromatography. So I think you got to all of them.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Actually, before we move on to the next question, I've heard like a bell ringing. Have you heard that too?
Oh, yes, I don't know what it is. It's something in my computer that every once in a while, I don't know whether it means a message has come in or what. I haven't been able to find out what it is that dings. So I hope it's not too disruptive.
Yeah, it's not a big deal. I was just wondering if like if it was like maybe you knew it was like some Zoom thing that was happening.
No.
But yeah, it's not a big deal.
I have, in addition, since we've gotten into this enforced quarantine and restriction and all, I have a group of friends that I play bridge with. We've found some online bridge that we can play. And we'll be sitting there playing bridge, and this ding will go off, and what's that? What's that? By now they've gotten used to it. They ignore it, but unfortunately, it's something that I haven't been able to figure out. Maybe I ought to have one of your
that'd be a job for
your folks come over to check it out for me.
Yeah, I'm sure to do that. So I guess actually, I mean, your life, I mean, you've had a lot of change, and kind of probably broadly, you've seen lots of changes in the world. And since you've lived in kind of the US your whole life, what we kind of want to know is, how is the American lifestyle, or even just like the general human experience, transformed over your lifetime?
Well, again, growing up in a small town, Saratoga Springs, and of course, I mean, so much has changed. I haven't been back to Saratoga in a few years, but it has changed. But the world is changing. The world constantly changes. The political environment changes. I mean, some of the things that we took for granted when we were in college. For instance, when I went to a public high school, which was co-ed, I came to MIT. We were in September of 1954, we were the largest entering class in their history up to that point. There were 950 people in the entering freshman class at MIT. Of those 950, 13 were women. 13.
That's
It
really low.
It was rare. You hardly ever saw a female walking around in the corridors or anything in classes. I don't remember any female professors or lecturers. There may have been some females in graduate student then, but we weren't exposed to them as undergraduates very much. So, I mean, and it was just taken for granted. when I first graduated, my first job out of school, I worked in a town called Leominster. And I mentioned it was a plastics town. I worked for a company called Foster Grant, which made polystyrene, made polyvinyl acetate, but its business had started as a fabricator, a custom injection molder, and so forth. And again, it was all men. And I remember, I think we had some female laboratory technicians. But I remember one day getting a call from reception that there was a sales representative from a company there to see me. And I walked down to see this person, and it was a woman salesman. And you got to know that this is like in 1960, 61. This is almost unheard of. This is the most astonishing thing. A woman was actually sales rep. Well, of course, women have, I mean, that's behind us now in terms of people's perception. I'm sure there are still areas of inequality in terms of that. But when my wife and I were first married and living in Leominster, she got a job teaching at the high school. And the women were paid less than the men. And they actually went to the school board and petitioned. And they didn't even petition for equal pay. They petitioned for just a raise so they could get a little more money because they were so pitifully paid compared to the male teachers. And again, at least in high school there were some female teachers. We lived in Leominster for 3 years, and the third year, by the third year, I knew I was going to be coming back to Cambridge because my thesis advisor had started his company and had already contacted me to come back. But by then, my wife was pregnant, and she had a very enlightened high school principal. She was teaching at the high school because all the other female teachers thought it was horrible that here was this pregnant woman still coming to school every day and teaching. Yeah. They thought, you don't do that. Well, the principal was more enlightened and wasn't the old school and said, oh, by all means, it's just, this is the norm. So things like that have changed so dramatically. And then we've seen, of course, technology. Do you know what a slide rule is? Have you ever heard of a slide rule?
I've heard of it. I'm not really sure what it does.
Okay. Well, just think of this. When people first went to the moon, there were no computers. Everything was calculated on slide rules. So just about. And a slide rule was the device you used for calculating. It was basically, there are a couple different forms, but it was really basically just you're putting two sticks together, and you're working with logarithms, so you're able to multiply and divide when sort of juxtaposing these logarithmic tables, which normally you would just add and subtract if you had just linear numerical tables. But anyway, things like that, the technology. I'll have to admit that I read the MIT alumni magazines, and some of the technology that's going on today just blows me away. I'm not sure I even understand it totally. I know I don't understand it totally, and I'm not sure I even understand it at all, some of the things they're doing. But it's just amazing how our whole civilization has changed. And yet, I don't know about you, last night I had the television set on, I was watching the riots in Brockton, and it was almost a surreal scene. Here were people, rioting for a just cause, unquestionably. But again, the rioting was not peaceful rioting. There was a lot of belligerency. There were tear gas, pepper spray, dogs barking, cars revving, protesters throwing fireworks into the ranks of the police. And it was just so disruptive. And I said to my wife, I can't believe this is America right now, but I can. It's just, I think everything has sort of converged now. A lot of the social injustice has been really exacerbated by the COVID and all of the restrictions that are now been placed and what's changed in society. So you've got all these issues. You've got people who are frustrated because of the inequalities that haven't been totally addressed and addressed satisfactorily. And layer on that all the economic uncertainty and just the social disruption. It's sad. It's very, very sad. We're going to have to work very hard to sort of restore our society. And I won't even get into the political discussion at all, just in terms of some of that. But it's things that you can't take things for granted. I said earlier, you embrace change, but that doesn't always mean change is good. And hopefully you do try to identify where change can be for the better and work to make that happen.
So actually, I have a question. Do you support, actually, I guess we'll get to this a little bit later, but do you support, like I know you said you support the cause, but do you support the riots themselves?
I don't support the riots. I support the people being able to protest,
Yeah.
speak out. And again, my grandparents were immigrants, and my wife's parents were immigrants, and they went through the classic immigrant experience, working to try and build a better life for themselves, and they had to fight hard. They didn't have a lot of social services working in their behalf. They had to create some of those. They had to really try to find the pathway and deal with the fact that along the way there were obstacles, there were prejudices that stood in the way, and some have mitigated, some have not. So we are far from perfect. We are far from perfect, and it's the human condition. We need to do what we can to try and make it better. So
you've touched on this a little bit, but how do you think the coronavirus has generally changed your outlook on life, especially because the elderly population is one of the demographics that's most susceptible to this disease?
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a good question. We're fortunate. I think a lot of the seniors in Lexington are fortunate that we're in a community where there are resources that we can draw on to enable us to conform to some of the behavior patterns that are recommended now. Our son is in the medical field, and he's been adamant he does not want us to going near a supermarket or a department store or other areas where there could be other people. So my wife and I have been pretty sequestered. I mean, we've gotten out, but we're not going very far, and we're not spending much time in company of other people right now. We are getting along fine. Zoom is terrific, friends and connections and all, and she's very involved in a lot of things in town meeting, and some of the other things. She's very involved in this, been very involved in this program of sewing masks for people. She's part of that coalition that's done over 15,000 masks. It's really amazing.
Yeah.
And great source of satisfaction. Participating in town work, and then keeping ourselves busy doing our things in the house. It's interesting that coming back to this talk, I heard Coughlin, the fellow from the Age Lab, he was saying that in some respects, and I thought this was an interesting insight, some of the things that were probably going to be happening in the long run for the senior community have been accelerated by the COVID pandemic. And by that, he referred to things like autonomous cars, but also some of the services and institutions that have grown up that up to now we've sort of assumed they were more Generation X or millennial involved. Things like ordering in food delivery services, ordering meals to be delivered, things of that sort. He said seniors are doing that where before they didn't do much of it, or a lot of seniors didn't. And now they've seen that it really has a place and can make the life there a lot easier and be a lot more convenient under certain circumstances. So it has definitely forced us to really adopt and make do. And I'm sure everybody has a different experience in terms of what has changed or hasn't changed because of the virus. But with us, it's more being more self-sustaining and adapting for it and not thinking anything of it. We can't wait to get back to being able to sit down and talk to people face to face. I mean, Zoom is fine, but it just doesn't do it. If you and I were sitting in the same room, it would be a lot different. And there was an article the other day, I think it was in the Wall Street Journal, about what makes Zoom different. And part of it is the authors claim that when people are sitting in the same room, the same conference room, the same just pub or whatever, you take a lot more visual clues in your conversation than you are able to do with Zoom. A lot more in body language and other things. So those are some of the differences that it has brought out. And but at the same time, we're staying in touch. We're keeping, we're trying, like Lexington at Home, we're having various groups that get together, a men's group or a ladies group or a chapter meeting and stuff. Or I have my board meetings by Zoom because there are things going on. And in fact, we've created a special newsletter just for our members to help them be aware. Again, it's this whole idea of keeping people informed, making them aware of what's going on. And it's helped me in a couple of respects. So I know it's brought some of our people in touch with your organization. So for that matter, it's forced us into behavior patterns that maybe we knew we could handle or we could deal with, but we hadn't bothered with until now.
So it sort of had to open you up to kind of new experiences almost?
Well, yeah, if you consider ordering your groceries online and then going and driving up to a parking space and opening the back deck of your car and letting someone drop the groceries in without ever, having any interaction other than saying hello and driving home. Yeah, that's a new experience. It's a trivial experience, but it's one that this is handy. This is not bad. This is a good way to do it. If I can get on my computer at 10 o'clock at night and put an order into Stop and Shop and drive up there the next morning at 10 o'clock and have someone put all those groceries that I've selected into the car and drive home, that's a new experience.
Yeah, it's pretty cool that they could do that.
Yeah, it's not a major experience, but nonetheless, it's fine.
Yeah. So what do you think about like reopening? I know that there's like a plan in Massachusetts. Like, do you think we're reopening too slow, too fast? Do you think we shouldn't be reopening at all?
Oh, well, we desperately need to restore some semblance of a prior existence. The economy is going to be limping along for a long time. The reality is that there's a danger, I think, in people assuming that, okay, we can restore now, there are no more risks. The risk is still there, and especially the more vulnerable population. If someone has had experience in the past, has had medical problems in the past, perhaps has had radiation or has, within the past year or so recuperated from some kind of an operation, their immune system is still compromised. And there's still a danger. The danger may be less, may not be as prevalent, but it's not going to be like throwing a switch and having the danger go away. So there's still going to have to be precautions. And I mean, all of the pundits have been talking about this in so many different ways, but things are changing, and things will have changed. I mean, office environments will have changed. The way people do business will have changed. I'm concerned. I look at the news reports and see things like the Lake of the Ozarks, all the parties and people just abandoning any precaution and social distancing and everything else. And hopefully this is a healthier population, which will be more resilient and more resistant to disease, but that doesn't preclude the fact that somebody's going to get sick, and somebody's going to get sick that maybe didn't have to get sick. But
Yeah.
but I think people are, I mean, unfortunately, the economy is so disrupted that there are people who are really in desperate straits. And in some cases, they're saying, right now, I can take that risk. I have to take that risk. I don't have any choice because I can't afford not to take that risk. I can't afford not to try and get back to work if there's work to be had. So we are in a horribly disrupted state. I'm hopeful that measures can be taken to try to restore some of what we've had, but it's not going to be the way it was. And I feel bad. I feel bad for, among other people, I mentioned before that I have 4 grandkids. Our oldest of the 4 just graduated from college, just finished college. I mean, she hasn't had a formal graduation. She won't have a formal graduation. But I don't know what she's going to do for a job. Our youngest of the 4 grandkids is just entering college. And just her experience is going to be different. The college experience is going to be different. I mean, the graduation, they both of them, one in high school, one in college, have been sort of deprived of all those rituals of graduation. You're what? Are you a sophomore? I think a lot of your
I'm a sophomore.
You're going to be a rising junior. Is that what it's called? Or
rising junior. Yeah.
Rising third year or whatever. So yeah, I mean, but even so, what you're experiencing is different now, and it will be different. So, but that's coming back to my theme about embracing change. I mean, the reality is we're not going to be able to go back to the way it was.
Yeah.
If we ever get back to the way, let's suppose it takes 5 years to get an economy back, to get everything, back, and there aren't any other disruptions in that 5 years, which, given the state of the world, who knows? But in 5 years, it's not going to be the way it would have been if this pandemic had never happened and things went along the way they were going along. And if we could step back and extrapolate that to the next 5 years, and 5 years from now, compare that to what reality is, they would be different, I'm sure. I don't know exactly how, but certainly I'm sure they will be in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Actually, what's concerning is I was reading up on this. Apparently, as kind of like we destroy the environment more with like climate change, diseases are going to become more prevalent, which is actually pretty concerning because it means that, this might happen like more than just this time.
That's right. That's right. I mean, the environment, it's interesting that, people have noticed that during this pandemic, when people's activities have been so curtailed, the view from space shows less air pollution.
Yeah.
People are able to see fish swimming in the canals in Venice. You couldn't even see into the water in Venice before this. So certainly a lot of the impact we're having on the environment is, it's amazing in some ways that in a relatively short period of time, some of these things have happened, but whether they're just transient or not, as soon as activity of any kind resumes, we're going to be back into that sort of that pace of changing things. And unless we adopt some very, very stringent climate control and environmental control over and above what we've had, it could be going back to business as usual. But I don't think we're going to get back there for a long time because of the way the economy has been impacted.
Yeah.
But the problem is you've got the pressure of all this population and the demands, and a lot of the population that is.
Oh, sorry, I can't hear you anymore. Uh, here. Can you? I think your Wi-Fi cut out, or maybe it's mine. Hold on. I can't hear you.
No.
Oh wait, I can hear you now.
Okay. All right.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Can you hear me? Yeah, I can hear you fine.
Okay.
Every once in a while with Zoom, I've got to call my internet provider uh, because they say every once in a while I get a little notice from Zoom saying your internet connection is unstable.
Yeah, I just saw that one too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Do you ever get that or not?
Yeah, I've gotten it. Yeah, I get it sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's what just happened.
Yeah.
A little glitch of some kind or another. All right, but we're back.
Yeah. So I guess you were. Where were you exactly?
I was talking about the fact that this may be repetitious. Uh, we have a population
Oh yeah.
worldwide that is used to certain things, and I think will aspire to them again. I mean, unfortunately, people tend to get very self-centered and are not going to say, well, I'm going to modify my behavior totally for the common good. It takes a certain type of altruism for that to happen, and it may or may not be something that we can count on. In fact, I think we can't count on it. And certainly seeing that there's still an awful lot of disparity in society and other people who've never had that and have every legitimate right to aspire to it.
Yeah. I guess. Well, you were talking about climate legislation and things like that. How has the role of government in American society changed over time?
Ooh, well, in some cases it's gotten. Uh, I will agree that there are times when there is well-intentioned over-regulation, and sometimes we fail to see the consequences of good intentions. So there needs to be checks and balances, and there needs to be, I think, a sort of a refurbishing of some of our political system, which again, hopefully every 4 years, we have a chance to do some of that. And I'm just hoping and praying we do this year as well.
So, do
I
you
mean,
think?
there's certain things about government. I mean, labor laws, certain protections, certain programs. At the same time, government bureaucracy is so huge. Every time someone proposes a monster change, universal health care, wow, that gets scary.
Yeah.
Because you see, if you're dealing with Medicare or Medicaid, just that is so complex. And some of the systems to keep track of all that get to be so unwieldy. And how do you layer even more complexity on top of that? So,
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. What do you like? I guess this is kind of more coronavirus related, but like recently people have been saying that like the states have sort of had to step up and like manage this crisis on their own with less help from the federal government. Like, do you think that that's like a common theme that's like been happening over time, that the states have had to do more things than they did like when you were born?
unfortunately, uh, that's the case. Again, I was born in 1936. The New Deal was underway. Um, the United States was not out of the Depression, the war economy that really fueled the economic turnaround in the United States. and catapulted us into becoming a world power. But the government took the initiative there, the federal government, because the states weren't up to it. The states didn't have the resources. I think whether or not the states play a more active role, there is an unfortunate lack of leadership at the government, at the federal level, to really make this more effective. And the other way, you're just going to have a patchwork quilt of different different states, each one doing something different. Once
Yeah.
again, you need central, strong leadership, which has been lacking.
Yeah. So I guess this is more of a senior service question. How is like the government? I think you were talking about this. Like, do you think the government's doing a good job of helping seniors during kind of like, I guess even without the pandemic? Do you think they have like good social security and things for seniors?
Good is relative.
Yeah.
Yeah. There are some very good programs. There are some programs that aren't well administered or well thought through. There are programs, some programs that are in need of strengthening. I can go back and look at the in my time at Minuteman Senior Services and see the array of programs there and see what things. I mean, unfortunately, it comes down to budgets, and there are budgets there are programs that are well funded, there are programs that are seriously underfunded, and sometimes you just have to make do with what you've got. I'll give you an example. This is not really in government agencies, but in state. When I was working at English at Large, it was an all-volunteer operation, but we only had a paid staff of an executive director and a secretary. But every year, we applied to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts for funding. And when things got tight, the funding started to dry up. And as soon as the funding dried up, that meant we couldn't sustain some of the programs we had going, trying to take on more immigrants, train and administer more volunteers to teach and tutor, because we were providing all this tutoring free of charge. So everything flowed from the budgeting. And even if we applied for the same budget as the previous year, there was no guarantee we were going to get it. So that's always the dilemma. I mean, I look at our government now, and they talk about federal deficit in the trillions. That scares me. That scares me. I don't know what that really means in terms of how we're going to manage around all that. But I think that we're borrowing against the future, and that's scary.
Yeah, that is definitely. Yeah, I've heard that it's gone like, I think it rose like a few trillion, I think, during this pandemic.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
This is actually just kind of in a different direction, and you already talked about this a little bit, but sort of on the issue of climate change.
Mm-hmm.
In the news, like especially this year, climate reform has been like obviously a big topic. I think you kind of touched on that a little bit. And some scientists have said that we only have like 10 years, give or take, before Earth is, permanently damaged. Even if, you don't agree with that, most scientists seem to agree that climate change has some pretty, long lasting bad effects, even if it doesn't, cause extinction. So the way countries and international organizations are functioning right now, do you believe that we can combat climate change and that it can be stopped before it's too late?
Well, one of the things that I've always wondered about is, I think there's no question that human activity contributes to climate change. But I don't know whether or not all climate change is due to human activity, and some is due to the normal long-range cycles of climate change that existed long before we appeared on Earth. I don't know the degree of each, but I certainly don't quarrel with the idea of trying to uh, have as much control over the things that we can identify as causing climate change as possible. One of the ones that interests me is the whole idea of nuclear power. And there are new generations and new designs of smaller nuclear reactors, power generating reactors, that are less expensive and in the long run could enable us to have more of these installations spread around to cut down on the use of fossil fuels. And unfortunately, nuclear energy has gotten such a bad rap
Yeah.
that, again, it's going to take a lot of education, a lot of demonstrations to prove that's the case. But there are options that would, and again, I'm not an expert on this, but there are designs called molten salt reactors that, if they were adopted, they would have prevented some of the disaster, like at Fukushima and the like, or Chernobyl, certainly. That there is a different format. You're not under high pressure steam, so if there's any kind of a fault or failure, you don't necessarily spew the countryside with radioactive material as you did at, say, at Chernobyl. But the whole idea of adopting new reactor designs and smaller scale, multiple installations is one that needs a lot of focus, a lot of attention, and I think in the long run has the potential to really make a difference or contribute to a difference. I don't know whether we'll ever be able to do as much as we need to do with just solar and wind energy. Certainly there's progress there, but I don't know whether it's going to be enough. So that's another option that we need to revisit.
Yeah. Yeah, that definitely makes a lot of sense. And you think that just to like clarify, you're like pro nuclear energy. You think that there's a way for us to like contain it so that it's not harmful, and that's what the molten salt reactor does.
There's some of that, because in some cases, some of the spent reactor rods can be used as fuel in some of the newer designs. So you get more efficient use of that and less radioactive waste.
Yeah, I
So
read that, like right now they're like essentially throwing them into swimming pools so that the radiation doesn't, get out,
right,
which definitely doesn't seem like a great strategy for dealing with large amounts of nuclear waste.
no.
Yeah.
And in my work, when I was involved with waters and with liquid chromatography, one of the areas that I really developed as a market was environmental testing. And one of the areas that I visited was Hanford, Washington, which is, my gosh, I mean, they're just tons and tons of radioactive waste stored in barrels. Just, I don't know. Frankly, I haven't been following it, so I don't know what's been happening there. But there's some bad stuff out there and bad locations. So
I'll
the
make
old
sure.
way is not the way that's going to carry us forward.
Yeah. I guess kind of along the similar but different kind of ideas, you've probably seen, young activists like, the famous Greta Thunberg, along with students at, LHS leading walkouts and trying to start grassroots movements. Do you think that this passionate activism can produce like real policy changes and help to fix the environment?
I hope so. I think the fact that you're inheriting what we're dealing with now. You're inheriting what's happened. You're inheriting the good and the bad and the ugly. And, you know, you've got to keep hammering on the idea that, you deserve a decent future. Your children deserve a decent future. And my grandchildren, my great grandchildren deserve a decent future. And if people aren't paying attention, there got to be ways to get their attention. And certainly with enough people standing up and speaking with a unified voice, um, there is a very good possibility that can exert the kind of pressure. Hold on one second.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Can we take a break?
Yeah.
I'm enjoying this, and I'll be glad to talk as long as you want, but I need to take a break for a couple minutes.
Yeah.
And
That's all right. Do you just want to leave the Zoom call running and then just tell me when you get back?
will that be yeah, that should be the easiest thing. It shouldn't take me more than about 5 minutes.
Yeah. That's perfectly fine.
Okay, I'm sorry. Thank you.
No,
Thank you. I'll be right back.
All right.
Hello, I'm back. Hi there.
Hi.
Hi. Okay.
All right. Hold on. Let me pull up my notes again.
Mhm.
Yeah. All right. Yep. I'm ready to go again. I guess we were, I think we were reaching a stopping point with the last question, right?
Yeah, with the climate change, you asked me about uh, young activists, and I say, yeah, speak with a big, strong voice. Among other things, you'll get people's attention. Secondly, uh, as you reach voting age, you get people's attention that way.
Yeah.
So yes, I would definitely say that's something to be considered. Yeah.
Well, I guess we can move on to the next topic. Now, you talked about it a little bit with the riots, but it's criminal justice. Are the riots in Minneapolis and in other parts of the United States, uh, such as Atlanta, are those reminiscent of the Rodney King riots in Los Angeles for you?
Yes. Yep. Yeah, definitely. I mean, we've had incidents of activism and riots. We had riots before the Democratic National Convention in Chicago. Unfortunately, over the years, there have been riots, and riots sort of, they reach a peak and then the energy subsides somewhat. I don't know whether people are placated by expectation that they've made change or not, but the reality is, I think we're getting to a point now where we're reaching a crucial stage. The combination of all the constraints and the economic disruption, as well as the frustration, uh, it's just it, it, it's going to have to make some changes. We're going to have to see some behavior. But I'm scared. I'm worried about how can we get people to change their basic attitudes, their basic prejudices. Um, and I mean, it's an intertwined problem. You've got problems of, and again, it comes back, I think, my simplistic way of looking at things, it comes back to taxation. Because if there isn't enough money put into good schools so that you have an educated population that can really be part of the economy, but instead you have a bunch of undereducated, disenfranchised people who are left to their own devices to survive, that's a recipe for more disaster and more disruption, more unrest. That's unfortunate. That's part of it. I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah. I guess kind of a broader question about crime. As far as our research tells us, during the war on drugs during the 80s, there was kind of a hard on crime stance in the government. And now with new legislation such as the First Step Act, there's been kind of more of a turn to rehabilitate instead of incarcerate. Do you kind of support this turn? And yeah, what do you think about that?
Definitely, if indeed these rehabilitation programs can be well enough funded again, and staffed and really developed, and a basic support network can be established. I mean, again, I'm talking ideal world now, unfortunately, in some cases. But if once again things can be established so that people who are being rehabilitated can remain rehabilitated and be given the tools to lead a more constructive life, that's fine. But if they're just left again to their own devices and they don't have the education, the training, they don't have the resources to draw on to help them, it's just going to be a never-ending cycle. And incarceration doesn't make the difference. Incarceration doesn't help. But we need the programs that can really be an effective alternative to incarceration.
And do you have any thoughts on what those could be? I don't know if you have any experience with this, but do you have any kind of ideas for that?
I don't have any direct experience with it, but the best I can do is say, if you don't have people that have anything to offer in the job market, and there aren't enough jobs, we're still in this never-ending cycle. We're in this never-ending cycle, and that I don't know what the answer is.
Yeah.
I don't think there is any simplistic answer, but I think there's got to be an awful lot of sort of infrastructure and programs built up to really deal.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Yeah, definitely. Actually, well, the next question was, what is your general view of criminal justice in America right now, especially in the context of what has happened in Minneapolis and other parts in the last week? But I think you already answered that, right? Is there anything else you'd want to add to that?
I think it's scary. I think you know, I haven't had firsthand exposure to some of the criminal justice, but from what you see, uh, and the problem is that probably 99% of policemen are decent and trying to do their job, but you know, 1% can make a huge difference. That's like my wife and I were talking last night about in Brockton. We were watching and we are saying, you know, it's right on the edge. It's right on the edge of one person doing one thing to cause everything to totally explode. Fortunately, that didn't happen. It was bad enough as it was, but it was, things reach almost the precipice, and you just hope they don't go over the precipice.
Yeah.
So the criminal justice, I wonder what's going to happen with the assassination, the shooting of the black runner in was it Atlanta?
So I'm not 100% sure about the location, but yeah.
But again, justice has got to be done. People have got to be held accountable. But you've got bigotry. You've still got people in this country that want to disenfranchise people and not allow them to vote. Again, you've got a lot of people also, I think, that feel the system has failed them. And they're willing to listen to any demagogue who promises them they're going to get a bigger piece of the pie.
And do you think that has to do with like the funding things you were talking about?
I think that's part of it. It's part of it. I mean, money isn't the answer. It's trying to do things that, well, money is part of the answer, because if you can't fund things, you can't do them. Volunteerism can only go so far. I mean, we've gotten ourselves into such a complex society with so many systems and overlapping jurisdictions and all that. You look at some of the social systems, some of the programs, and there is sort of an overlap in terms of the same resources being split among 3 or 4 different programs. But no one's willing to say, well, my program isn't as important, so we can phase it out and put all the money into this program, which I think is a better program. And it's like politicians. So politicians, their whole raison d'etre is to get themselves reelected.
Yeah, and that's not really in your mind a good thing, right? Because
if we had term limits, that might be a lot better.
Yeah.
Enforceable term limits.
Yeah, that would be like you mean like what happens in the presidency, but except in like states too?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Might be in lots of different disciplines almost.
Wait, so I'm a little bit confused. Why would that kind of like solve some of the issues you were talking about?
If people become entrenched, and I think they lose some of the accountability is lost. You need people to be accountable. You need some people that really want to try and impose standards. And it's not anything to have a program. The question is, can you point to what kind of results the program is getting?
Yeah, that definitely makes a lot of sense. Yeah, do you have any last kind of thoughts on criminal justice?
Well, I think there's a morality issue within criminal justice on both sides. It's all part of society, and working for the common good is an awfully idealistic position. People have their own needs, their own motives, their own concerns, and it's very hard to get people to compromise. And I don't know, I mean, the criminal justice system, like so many of our systems, needs to constantly be evaluated, and well-meaning individuals really put together programs that can be held up as a model for how things can work better.
Yeah.
One of the things that always was an issue on any scale I worked with, if I ever was dealing with a problem that seemed to be too big and too intractable, I used to try and say, well, what's a smaller part of this problem that we can put our hands around and make work? And that's part of what I think in some cases needs to be done. We can't have wholesale reworking of programs in criminal justice or anything else, but there need to be some really good models that people can emulate and maybe give other people the incentive to adopt to improve the criminal justice system.
Yeah, I guess that does sound like a good idea because, even if you can't solve everything, if you just look at a smaller part of the problem, at least you can solve that.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess kind of shifting gears here. You were talking about healthcare a little bit before. So what's your stance on healthcare in the U.S. right now? What works and what doesn't, in your opinion?
Oh dear, that's a tough one. I mean, I can speak from personal experience, and in terms of our particular health insurance and so forth, and we've been fortunate that we've had good health insurance, and we've been able in this area to avail ourselves of some very good health professionals when we've needed them. There are places in the country where it's seriously lacking, and there are places that are totally underserved. And I don't know what you do about that.
Yeah. What do you think of like a single payer system? I think you said you didn't think that would work very well.
Well, the thing that concerns me is that our healthcare system is so complex right now in terms of the different insurance programs, jurisdictions, liability issues, that trying to put everything under one administrative blanket is going to be pretty complicated. And it always frightens me when you have a list of approved medical procedures and you have a clerk who's not medically trained making decisions on whether or not the insurance company is going to pay for a certain medical procedure. It just doesn't seem like the right thing to do. So I just worry about single payer systems being at all efficient. I've had occasion, not anything major, but I've had occasion to have to deal with the Social Security Administration on one or two issues, and it's a labyrinth. It's impossible to get anything, and again, it's huge. They have it's a huge organization, huge operation, and it's very, very difficult to get something to work without a lot of extra effort, a lot of negotiation, a lot of paperwork, following up, a lot of time spent on hold on the phone.
Yeah.
So I've got one minor issue right now, and I'm thinking about trying to go through our congressional representative to see if they can help me with it at all. But I'm reluctant to take away any resources right now from what they're doing with the pandemic. So I've sort of held back from contacting them, and partly because it's not a major thing. So, and I've got some time. I've got a deadline in November or something like that. So I've got some time to try to see if I can get any kind of an answer, or get someone to help me unravel some of the red tape here. But it's not major. It's not major, fortunately. If it was, I wouldn't hesitate to immediately try to command some of those resources from our representative's office.
Yeah. And what do you think about like people have been saying like prices of insulin are really high? Do you think there should be like price caps on certain drugs?
Certainly, if there's um, evidence that there's gouging going on, that certainly was the case with the EpiPen case, that is unconscionable. And there needs to be some kind of oversight there. At the same time, I saw what it takes when I was working with pharmaceutical companies. They were developing certain drugs, and the amount of work that went into developing a drug and the different stages before a drug could even begin to be tested for its real efficacy was sometimes bewildering, not only in the amount of effort, the amount of expense, but the amount of time it took for all of this to happen. So, I think sometimes people may not appreciate how expensive it is to develop a new drug. And, when a company invests in 3 or 4 drugs and all of them get to a certain stage of testing where there's a huge investment already in that drug, and the evaluation fails and they have to abandon that drug, that's just money that's going down the drain. So the only way you can, the logical way to cover some of that expense is through the profitability on drugs that are already in the marketplace and are accepted and are used in any amount. So drugs, it's understandable that drugs in some cases are expensive, but in other cases, there are cases where it's out of the realm of what's reasonable.
Yeah. So you think that there should be legislation, but you understand that sometimes prices have to be high?
Well, there have to be, you have to cover the fact that new drugs we need new drugs all the time. You think about all the different programs going on right now, trying to come up with a vaccine for the COVID virus. There's a lot of money being spent right now, a lot of money being thrown at it. And in some cases, unfortunately, you can't accelerate very much the rate at which these drugs either pass muster or don't. You have to go through the testing. You have to make sure that there's a time element that is covered on these. And if it's not there, you can't be sure. I mean, there's such a risk of assuming that a drug's going to work because there's so many side effects and so many complexities that can happen. And so it's reasonable that the price of existing established drugs help fund the development of new drugs. That's not the only funding source, but that's certainly a contributing factor.
Yeah, so you said that your company was pretty involved in the biotechnology sector, right?
Well, they were in the, not so much in the biotech. At the time I was there, there was more biotech coming along, but in synthetic drugs, steroids, and so forth. That was one of the big new drug classes in the 70s and in the late 70s. Prostaglandins, some of these drugs. They're synthesized versions of natural drugs in some cases because they were a lot more consistent than trying to do extraction of natural products.
Yeah. So how do you think like kind of I guess including that how do you think healthcare has changed from like before the 2000s to present day?
Oh my gosh, with all the work going on now in tailored, individually tailored therapies and treatments, stem cells, some of the transplantation, some of the biomechanical devices. I mean, it's just gotten bewilderingly complex, more so than. I was never an expert in that area, but I got enough exposure to it so that I could see what was going on. But it's become much more, with all of the work and gene splicing and so forth. Now it's another whole world, much more complex. Hopefully for the better. Hopefully for the better.
Yeah. Yeah. Hopefully, I guess. So I guess we're in the home stretch here. How do you think we should erase the stigma around aging?
That's a good question. I guess people are never going to, people who are young and feel they're going to live forever, and don't have backaches and so forth, will never fully appreciate that people who have gotten, who hung around a lot longer, still have a lot to offer, still have a good time, still can enjoy themselves. But we have different interests, different needs, different wants. Again, this fellow from the Age Lab was talking about autonomous vehicles. And he was saying that at some point, some of the people that are going to be some of the real early adopters are not going to be the young people. They're going to be the seniors. Once these things the technology gets to be good enough, seniors are going to say, hey, this is great. I don't have to give up driving. I can still go to the supermarket, or I can still go visit my friends, or I can still go on a road trip, whatever. Because some of the things that used to depend on my reflex abilities or other physical abilities no longer are as limiting. So he was saying that that's one of the areas that we're going to see the changes occurring. And as people become independent, mobile, and so forth, I think we look at some of the accomplished people who have great accomplishments in their senior years, whatever they may be, the 70s, 80s. Of course, it all depends what people consider seniors and aging. I mean, to people in your generation, probably 60-year-olds seem old. To my generation, 60-year-olds are young kids still. So, it's just part of, I think, people's outlook on things. I got to tell you, as you get older, you don't necessarily, in some cases, consider yourself older. You're looking out of a body that happens to be older, but you're looking at it with a different mind. You're still looking at it perhaps with a younger person's mindset. And that depends on the individual. So, there are always going to be some perceptions of what aging is. But the more we can cope, the more we can manage, the less dependent we become. But the reality is, you got people that get old, get sick, need help, need institutionalizing, need more medical care. As medicine improves, maybe that'll help. But as we said earlier, you're going to get perhaps one set of conditions get solved, but something else then arises. And that may be the next thing that is equated with being old. So I'm not too worried about the anti-aging perception right now. I'll just deal with it if I run across it.
On a case-by-case basis?
Mm.
Yeah. So I guess we can move on. Beside from what we've talked about, like what kind of big dangers do you think that society should be warned about? This can include like artificial intelligence or other things we haven't talked about.
Uh, when I was working on robotics, I had occasion to collaborate with a guy who was doing some work on robotics, laboratory robotics, for a pharmaceutical company in England, big company, Glaxo. And this fellow was a Scotsman. And we were talking about artificial intelligence one day. And he really stopped me short. He said, in his real great Scotch burr, he said, just remember, he said, when we talk about artificial intelligence, we also must talk about artificial stupidity. So there's some of that, and I don't know whether it's really artificial stupidity, but I think there's enough been written right now that the people that are creating the various artificial intelligence algorithms, in some cases, are unconsciously building certain biases into them. So that artificial intelligence per se isn't really yet the end-all be-all. It's going to be a long time before it happens. People are becoming aware that one of the things that influences a lot of intelligence that artificial intelligence hasn't yet been able to capture is empathy. When you're dealing with someone and you're talking to them and all, you know, as we said earlier, you deal with clues, you deal with verbal clues, you deal with context, and there are an awful lot of these elements that artificial intelligence still doesn't account for. And one of the real questions is going to be, will it ever? And how will it do that? So I think, you know, we have to be cautious about any new panaceas. As much as I said, you know, change is interesting, you have to make sure that you look at it with a good open mind and not just assume that it covers all of the things that are presumably being improved upon. It may not be, or there may be some other unintended consequences. So have to be alert for those.
Do you think there's, you know, besides for AI, do you think there's anything else that you would want to warn society about that we haven't already talked about?
Oh, not really. I tend to be an optimist. I really do. I tend to be an optimist. I don't know whether that came across or not, but again, I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful. And as I said, this is going to be a tough period right now. I'm hopeful on a scale. Right now, I look at my 4 grandchildren. One of them just graduated from college. I'm not sure what she's going to do. 2 of them are going into their 3rd year, and they both had summer jobs lined up. They thought those have disappeared. And the youngest one is she's doing some volunteer work right now, helping a smaller organization with their social media work because they're not familiar with it. But she's doing that on a volunteer basis. I don't know what opportunities are going to open up for them because, again, just restoring society to where it is. So I do worry. I don't know whether it's too simplistic, but we've gotten through tough times before, and I assume we don't have any choice but to work through them again. And I'm sure there may be some things that evolve that, once again, we never anticipated until we've had to deal with them. So I'm hopeful that will come about.
Yeah, definitely. It's an optimist.
Yeah.
There. So I guess closing question. Don't worry, we're almost done. As a young man, what advice would you give to me and my peers as I grow up in kind of a ever-changing world? You know, any opportunities to latch onto, any words of wisdom? You know, that's kind of the goal of our project, to learn from you guys. And I know you've already talked about, you know, embracing change. Is there anything other kind of piece of advice you'd give?
Well, you got to follow the things that interest you and the things that you enjoy doing. I think in general, if you want to be good at something, you have to enjoy doing it. I don't know whether if you really don't like something, how you can really be good at it. So I think trust your instincts. Follow what seems reasonable. Keep your eyes open to see whether or not, there's more than one pathway within that framework. But I guess that's really as much as I could offer right now.
That's certainly good advice. And I appreciate you having this conversation with me. Are there any parting words you'd like to tell the camera or whoever watches this video later?
Well, I've enjoyed chatting with you. I'm impressed. Again, you did your homework. Have you had many of these interviews yet, or?
No, actually, this is my first one. I was a little bit nervous before, but no, you've been very, very nice.
Okay. Well, you've done a great job of preparing for it, and I'm impressed with what you folks are doing, and my hats are off to you. And you'll be hearing from me. I probably need some help around the house on a few things, so
Yeah, no problem.
we'll be in touch.
Yeah. I'll talk to you later, Mr. Fallick.
Okay, Armaan, it's been a pleasure. Good luck to you.
Thanks. It was good talking to you.
Keep up the good work.
Will do.